My hair is so big this week, it's literally not gonna be in frame! Hi, I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and this is Mod Month Week 2. Alright, here it is. Ta-da! Backed up all the way so you can get the full picture, but I can't back my head up anymore because then this will get stuck on the records. Enjoy this because it will literally never happen again. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Mod Month is the 4-part mini-series where I feature modern classic albums the whole month of May. Stuff released in the past 25 years that I think deserves to be talked about alongside this channel's regular fare, like this, and this. If deep dives aren't your thing, don't worry. I'll be doing 60-second versions of all 4 parts of this series here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. For part 2 of Mod Month, we're continuing our exploration of why does this record sound the way it does, and what influence has it had. Today, it takes on a whole new meaning, considering the magnifying glass put on this artist's personal life once again via the biopic coming out. I feel it's important to focus on this woman's music to honor her. Her work is so closely tied to who she was, and I feel it's the best way to get to know her. Plus, like part 1's album, Is This It by The Strokes, this album sparked a whole movement of music through the 2000s and 2010s and inspired 2 of the biggest artists of that decade. The Blue-Eyed Soul revival happened because of Amy Winehouse, and your Mod Month Part 2 album, Back to Black. Congrats to those who guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my community tab. That's where I post my hints to what next week's album is gonna be. I host polls where sometimes you get to pick what's on the show. I make announcements when I'm places that aren't here. You can find all of that on my channel. Alright, let's take the plastic off. So my copy is a repress. It's the Target exclusive run from this year with an alternate album cover, and as B-roll Abby will be showing you, it's on hot pink vinyl. And you guys, I f***ed up. Not only does it have an alternate cover photographed by Misha Richter, I didn't realize that the UK and US track listings were different. I did my research for The Strokes, but it slipped my mind here. My B. As you'll see on the back cover, the US version has the Ghostface Killah remix of You Know I'm No Good closing out the album, while the UK and streaming services have the official track listing with Addicted as the closer. My best guess is the US market was like, hell no, we are not having a song with this many overt references to the Weeds closing out the album, so they swapped it out with the remix, but I do feel like us dumb Americans lucked out with the cover art. Amy looks fabulous here. You can see some of her famous tattoo sleeve, albeit censored with the bikini top, which is so funny to me. Her long hot pink nails and pale pink lipstick screams 60s bad girl glamour, which simply wouldn't be complete without her signature cat eye and impossibly large beehive hairdo, a la her greatest style inspiration, Ronnie Spector of the Ronettes. Returning viewers will know I love dressing for a theme, but I didn't even try to replicate this on myself today. I know I would look dumb as hell. This look was Amy's and Amy's alone. Instead, I went for the birth of the Amy Beehive, this photo shoot of her by Phil Knott in the year 2000. Tracy Cahoon, Amy's hairstylist from 2006-ish to 2010, describes her first meeting with a 17-year-old Amy at this photo shoot. She was dressed in flare jeans with scarves in her hair, not unlike Janis Joplin. And she asked for a beehive, so Tracy backcombed her hair, put one of Amy's scarves around it, and she loved it. She never forgot how much she loved that hair. 6 years later, when it was time to photograph this album cover, she gave Tracy a call. Together they came up with these gravity-defying concoctions of hair pieces. Yes, Amy's hair was a wig that she'd wear for the rest of her career. Her quote, hair baby, as they called it, is on this cover. She wore it when she won 5 Grammys for this album.
And the Grammy goes to Amy Winehouse.
That's what my little flower reference is. Tracy had a huge hand in bringing the Amy image as we know it into the world. Back to Black, of course, features Amy Winehouse on vocals, backing vocals, and some guitar, backed by a whole army of session musicians, including Binky Griptite and his Dap Kings band, courtesy of Daptone Records, Vincent Henry on sax, Bruce Purse on trumpet and horns, and producer Salaam Remi on drums, bass, double bass, and some guitar. We have two guest vocalists singing backup on He Can Only Hold Her, Zalon Thompson and Ade. Back to Black was produced and arranged by Salaam Remi and Mark Ronson, with additional arrangements by Gabriel Roth. Roll transition. So as you've probably gathered from that personnel section, we have an interesting happening this week, one that I don't think I've had on this channel yet. We have not one, but two producers in two separate cities working on the same album. Since I talk about mostly 60s and 70s music on this channel, they just didn't have the technology back then to make something like this happen. Unless you're Led Zeppelin and have a bazillion-dollar budget, but they are the exception to the rule. So let's start with some of Salaam Remi's account. What casual fans might not know about Back to Black, I certainly didn't until I started researching this video, is that work on this record began before Amy's first album, Frank, was complete. In an interview with Reverb in 2021, Salaam recalls Amy cutting early versions of Just Friends and Addicted during Frank sessions in the fall of 2003. After a couple years away in England, plugging away at Frank, Amy linked back up with Salaam at his home in Miami. He'd only just bought this house, it wasn't even furnished yet, but quote, "She stood in the middle of my empty living room and said, I want to record right here." So Salaam was like, all right, bet. He built a working studio around his living room. Quote, "I intentionally used the room as an instrument." He used the whole home as an instrument, really. Take Me and Mr. Jones, for example. Amy was making a cup of tea while cutting the vocals, totally forgot about it. The kettle goes off halfway through the song, and it made it onto the record. Since Salaam and his musicians had a history with Amy, the vibe was super chill. On to Mark Ronson.
Amy, right? I'm like, I'm Mark. She goes, oh, nice to meet you. Yeah, I'm going up to see Mark Ronson. And I'm like, no, like,
I am Mark.
I'm Mark. She's like, I thought you were going to be like an old Jewish guy with a beard or something. Like, maybe because she like her.
At his first meeting with Amy in New York, Mark said she talked about listening to lots of girl groups, the Shangri-Las, the Crystals, yes, he hit me, and it felt like a kiss, the Ronettes, jukebox music she heard while playing pool at the bars. Quote, "They were selling heartbreak on this kind of giant scale. The world is going to end if my boyfriend doesn't take me back." At their first meeting, Mark was kind of messing around on the studio piano and wound up spitting out some chords that sounded like something these girl groups would make.
You know?
So he chased the demo overnight, adding drums and tambourine.
Okay, well, I could play a really simple pattern that just goes boom, tss, boom, boom, tss. But then actually when I got in front of the drums, I realized I wasn't even good enough to play that.
To get that kind of faux wall of sound feel, he just put a ton of reverb on everything, then slapped some surface noisy staticky filters on the piano and drums, and in all of one night, Mark created his first non-sample bass song. The next morning, Amy took the demo into the back room of the studio, literally just behind a curtain, and came up with the lyrics and melody of Back to Black in all of an hour. Both the title track and Rehab were written in that first 3-day visit. The latter started as a 12-bar blues. No doubt, Amy's time with Mark was an aha moment. This is where Back to Black began in earnest. Now, how do you get an album with two producers thousands of miles apart to sound remotely sonically cohesive? Tracks were sent back and forth between session players in New York and Miami via the good old Apple Disc. It pulled the way Dropbox or Google Drive might pull today. By doing this, Salam could adjust his jazzier, more hip-hop style songs to sound like the 60s style stuff Mark was doing in New York. Back in Miami, Salam's home setup consisted of vintage equipment with modern touches, perfect for Amy's Brill building and Motown-inspired sound. He brought in a baby grand, a C3 organ with a Leslie cabinet, Hofner violin-style basses like Paul McCartney played in the Beatles, and his drum kit. He plays drums for almost every song he worked on. The basses were left over from his work with Santana 6 years earlier, and his technique of miking the drums to get that big sound, like this, came from those sessions too, thanks to producer and engineer Jim Gaines. Once back in New York, Amy cut 5 songs in 4 days with Mark and the Dap Kings. The title track was the first song Mark ever recorded with a band. Amy totally trusted her producers with her creative vision, but her one request, no strings. As we know from the title track, Love is a Losing Game, Mark totally went behind her back. As for the writing process, quote, the songs would just write themselves. It was all very stream of consciousness, especially the lyrics. In her words, quote, for a song, you have to remember how you felt. You have to remember what the weather was like. You have to remember what his neck smelled like. You have to remember all of it. The memories were pretty fresh for Amy. There was a lot of emotional fuel to pour in. According to her, this is what Back to Black is about. Quote, I wrote an album I'm really proud of about a bad situation I got through, and that's pretty much where it begins and ends for me. The track listing of Back to Black goes as follows. I'm talking all my lipstick off, Jesus. I got a lot to say about this record. Opening up side 1, we have Rehab, followed by You Know I'm No Good. Then Me and Mr. Jones. Next, Just Friends. Then Back to Black, and side 1 closes with Love is a Losing Game. Opening up side 2, we have Tears Dry on Their Own, followed by Wake Up Alone. Then Some Unholy War. Next, He Can Only Hold Her, and the album should close with Addicted. Again, my version closes with the Ghostface Killah remix of You Know I'm No Good. Going in, I knew if I was going to cover this record, I had to do so in a music first, production first, Amy's talent first way. As much a reputation as she had for being troubled and erratic and as many eyebrow-raising antics as she partook in, the making of Back to Black was a happy period in her life. She was proud of herself for overcoming such turbulence. As much as I would love to just focus on those aspects, it cuts out a lot of the context of Back to Black. A decent chunk of this record is about Amy's ex-boyfriend, then husband, and then ex-husband, who ended up in prison during this album's promotional cycle.
For my Blake incarcerated.
And the substance abuse that both fueled and was fueled by their relationship. This guy was one of Amy's addictions. But if you read the liner notes, she dedicates this album to a whole lot of other people, including her recently passed Nan and lots of her friends and family. From these experiences, Back to Black is deeply and viscerally confessional. You want to give Amy a hug just as much as you want to grab her shoulders and shake her. And yet she's got a great sense of humor about it all. See Rehab.
Gotta let me go to rehab. I said no. Yes, I've been black.
Lyrically, this was supposed to be a tongue-in-cheek commentary on her public image. She's all sass on Rehab, but it wound up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. She did need to go to rehab. Her management tried to get her there, but her family was like, nah, she's good. And then she was like, nah, I'm good.
And all of a sudden you look at each other and go, hey, maybe that's a lyric?
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
She said it with its rhythm and it sounded hooky. Like she just goes, and I was like, no, no, no.
Musically, Rehab shows off off Amy's jazz and blues background. She grew up around lots of musicians, and it shows. This was one of those songs that she wrote as a 12-bar blues on her nylon string guitar. Though Mark gussied it up with a horn section, grooving keys, piano, bells, and those girl group hand claps, Rehab stays true to its roots. I'm all about sequencing on an album package, so I love that a Mark song and a Salaam song were placed back to back to kick off the record. Rehab says, this is what Mark's all about. Big band, big horns, strings, and a lot of bells. You Know I'm No Good is our introduction to Salaam, a hip-hop beat, jazzier horns and bass, and that breezy, tropical-sounding C3 organ. As much a singer as Amy was remembered as, You Know I'm No Good is Amy the storyteller. Each verse is a different vignette of the narrator's boyfriend catching her cheating. What did you do with him today? And sniffed me out like I was Tanqueray. I love Amy's performance of "'Cause you're my fella, my guy." It's like she's trying to butter him and us up before casting us away. Hand me your Stella and fly. In the next verse, wouldn't you know it, she's thinking of her boyfriend while she's with her ex. She runs back to him. When we're married, there'll be none of him no more. I cried for you on the kitchen floor. Finally, they go on their honeymoon. They're in the tub, all is well, then tragedy. He notices rug burn on her knees. I love this dynamic bass line to keep the song flowing with the narrative and the brass that acts like punctuation at the end of Amy's phrases. Ladies and gentlemen, the line you and I have all been waiting for. What kind of fuckery is this? Welcome to my favorite song on the record, Me and Mr. Jones. This song is so fucking funny. It's 2.5 minutes of reading this guy for filth because he made her late to a Slick Rick concert. What kind of fuckery are we? What kind of fuckery are you? Nowadays, you don't mean dick to me. Aside from Sammy, you're my best black Jew, that's a Sammy Davis Jr. shout out, because who is the Mr. Jones in question? As the story goes, Nas. Amy had a big fat crush on Nas. Full of laughs as Me and Mr. Jones is, this is one of those moments where production and performance marry. That's Amy on the 2-part harmony, first of all. At the very top of her contralto range, that's the lowest vocal range you can have as a woman, on the top part. And her runs are sublime, talk about vocal control. This is the song that made me notice that beautiful, warm, room tone echo on Amy's voice. It gives the song a super old school feel with the watery guitar. Chasing the Demo is fascinating to me. They took a straight R&B, Latin-infused track and turned it into a burlesque bump and grind with the distant piano, low brass, and sturdy drums. Burlesque was having a revival in the 2000s thanks to performers like Dita Von Teese hitting the mainstream. If this was Amy's idea of a cabaret show, I would have a blast. The fact that she could pull this off is a testament to her talent.
When we're weekend, the time to be just friends.
Amy goes from bold, brash, and brazen on Me and Mr. Jones to tender and sultry on Just Friends, almost delicate. There's No Greater Love off Frank shows this side of her too.
Oh, heart so true.
Now this is interesting. The lyrics are telling this guy he belongs with his wife. I'm not ashamed, but the guilt will kill you if she don't first. But her performance and the breezy instrumentals say, come see me again. At my room in this tropical resort, I'll be waiting. What an intoxicating blend of instruments. Romantic nylon string acoustic guitar, reggae drums, melodic horns, and that watery organ, which almost sounds like a Wurlitzer to top it all off. You know, sometimes you come across a pop album like Chemtrails Over the Country Club or The Tortured Poets Department, and you go, why the hell was this the title track? Back to Black, though, absolutely deserving of title track status.
He left no time to regret.
Back to Black was Amy's expression for going back to your vices, which she was no doubt familiar with. I believe every time she sang this, she sacrificed a little bit of herself. Back to Black is appropriately dark and cinematic, with echoey tambourine, reverberating guitar, almost like a Western movie, bells, and swelling strings. It's chilling even when she croons such lines as, "I tread a troubled track, my odds are stacked," and such stark imagery as, "Life is like a pipe, and I'm a tiny penny rolling up the walls inside." So that line actually got me choked up last night, because Amy paints a picture of vulnerability and helplessness. A tiny penny rolling up a wall is never gonna make it to the top. Then the refrain. It interpolates the Be My Baby drums, but twists it into a funeral march with tragic strings and piano. Amy's performance is just inimitable. I catch how she sings Black slightly different every time in the refrain. I liken her voice to another instrument. She fits right in with a horn section. Back to Black, show-stopping, signature song material.
For you, I was a flame. Is a losing game.
Love is a Losing Game is another gorgeous, intimate Amy moment, this one more mournful than flirty. She likens the end of this romance to the end of a film, played out by the band, and now the final frame. It burned so hot it never could have lasted, a 5-story fire, a gamble that burned them both. Over futile odds and laughed at by the gods, she sings with soul-crushing tenderness. According to her, it wasn't just doomed from the start. Fate played a cruel joke on them by making them fall in love with each other. On to side 2, and the other track I have been dying to talk about.
All I could ever be to you is the darkness that we knew. Yeah, this regret.
Thanks to Salam, this song became an interpolation of Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell's Ain't No Mountain High Enough.
Now I'm able to sample the sonic of something and listen to it and not actually physically sample the record at all.
Taking a song about new beginnings and strength in unity and twisting it into a song about being alone and endings while keeping it just as hopeful, that's genius. The woodwinds and flutes flutter atop ascendant piano and brass that meshes perfectly with Amy's backing vocals. It's topped off with that clacking percussion top to bottom. Salam nailed this track. Apparently making these lyrics fit the arrangement was a challenge for Amy, but you'd never know it.
I don't know about that, buddy.
I knew I'd do that.
She sings this with such defiant altruism, you'd think she wrote the damn thing. I can almost imagine her shaking her fist at the sky while passionately belting "The sky above ablaze," but she does acknowledge going back to black in another sense. I'll be some next man's other woman soon. Considering how autobiographical Back to Black is, Wake Up Alone might be the most universal post-breakup song on here.
And I wake up alone.
About keeping yourself busy so you don't think of him and therefore slip back into your vices. But it's no use. She dreams of him soaked in moonlight and wakes up alone. She can't escape. His face in my dreams seizes my guts. Her performance of that line especially, in contrast with the rest of the more down-tempo songs here, shows off Amy's breadth as a performer and singer. She glides from fiery passion to crippling loneliness. She was like Billie Holiday in the sense that she didn't have much of a range to work with, but man, did she use what she had.
I sit and I stare. I know that I'll soon go mad.
Dynamics and phrasing will take you a long way. Notice how she sings and I wake up alone with slightly different emphasis every time. I'm bitter about waking up alone. I'm sad about waking up alone. I'm scared of waking up alone. You get it all.
If my man was fighting some unholy war,
Some unholy war. Salam was devastated when the ballad version of this one didn't make the cut. He felt like it was some of his greatest work, but Amy said she sounded like she was dying. To her, this was an album about overcoming, not succumbing. That being said, when she played this live, she would start off with the ballad version's introduction before taking it to the up-tempo arrangement. Unholy War is the most "the world is going to end if I don't have my man" song. For that reason, I feel like it might have translated better as a ballad. He can only hold her. When I first realized what was going on in this song, I was gagged. It's a whole 3 minutes of Amy calling her love rival a dumb bitch. And she's not mincing words. She flat out says the lights are on, but no one's home. This is sassy Amy, backed by triumphant / mocking horns and a crew of singers that aren't her. This song would never fly nowadays. People would be complaining that Amy wasn't being a girl's girl. While this song is maybe the weakest here musically and lyrically, it feels like I'm in the chair next to Amy at the nail salon and she's gossiping about the other woman with me. And finally, the case of the missing closer. How tragic it is that I don't have Addicted on my version because it's so much fun. It's a 1-2 punch of the narrator telling this girl she's sleeping with her boyfriend and the weed was better than the sex. More than addicted. I like the super hollow punchy drums, I like the soprano backing vocals, I like the 70s soul-inspired bass and flute. I really wish we saw some more Motown flavors on here. I also wish we got more guitar solos on this album, but man, Addicted is, say it with me folks,
a much needed lighter spot on the record.
So what have I learned from part 2 of Mod Month? Amy was good. Like, I knew she was good, but now I know just how influential she is and why she was special. For one, her style no doubt influenced 2 of the biggest female pop stars of the past decade, Adele and Lana Del Rey.
She was definitely right. Love is a fucking game, isn't it? She was right all along. You know how much Amy means to me. Like, Frank, that record is more important to me than like Back to Black is for most other people.
Yeah.
Amy's sound was always vintage inspired, whether that was soul, jazz, old school hip hop, or reggae. What do all of those genres have in common? They have deep ties to Black culture. All of the above, except for reggae, is Black American music. I can't help but feel like that's why she did so well here in the States, but she wasn't a revival act. What set Amy apart was A, how cathartic her songs are, and B, every single time she sang, it was a different interpretation. It was never the same Rehab, or You Know I'm No Good, or Back to Black twice. She was never afraid of over-singing anything, even if at times she could. She put amazing trust in her producers to make this happen. You can tell they loved her a lot, and she loved them too. Salam's name is on Amy's memorial. Mark was very close to her too. He still has those handwritten lyrics of Back to Black. He honors her by sometimes posting Amy's demos to TikTok for fans to hear.
Amy and her guitar.
And I tread a troubled track.
Hell, even her idol, Ronnie Spector, gave her high praise in the Back to Black installment of the classic album series. Amy lived through some shit to write Back to Black. I can only imagine the material she would have come up with had she pulled through the strife at the end of her life. Transforming pain into art is just about as rock and roll as it gets. It's the only consistent, timeless thing about the medium, really. And I say that as someone who knows rock and roll. Not only did Amy sing this with soul, this is her soul, a collage of things, sounds, and people she loved, equal parts a love letter to her influences, the performance of a lifetime and authentic lived experience. Back to Black is 100% Amy and 100% moving, and that's why Back to Black is a modern classic. My personal favorites off this one are You Know I'm No Good, Me and Mr. Jones, Just Friends, Back to Black, and Tears Dry on Their Own. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays and all of the Mod Months, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's Mod Month Part 2, Back to Black by Amy Winehouse. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Amy? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet has to say, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'll be posting new episodes of Mod Month every Friday for the rest of May. And you can catch me on Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye!